Welcome to the Empowering You webinar for April the 23rd. We're very thankful that you're taking part of your day to be with us. We expect that some more folks will join just a little bit later here. Yeah, folks are still coming on. Our hope today is to help you become familiar with what's the latest that's happening related to nutrition assistance at the federal level, but also how our state is implementing some changes to school meals into the SNAP program in order to respond to the coronavirus pandemic that we are all having to find ways to cope with and live through just now. We thank the many of you who are very busy helping clients at your agency or being an advocate for people. If you are perhaps retired or are working a different kind of field but care about things like criminal justice and affordable housing and nutrition assistance, we appreciate your work as an advocate. Today, we have guest speakers that will be presenting their expertise. We have Sarah Ritter, who some of you met when she was an intern with us and called her Sarah Swearer back then. But Sarah is the manager of public policy and the liaison between Operation Food Search and the Missouri State Legislature. She engages elected officials around issues about food and hunger insecurity. And as a registered lobbyist, she works with legislators, legislative staff, and other government officials to promote public policy initiatives that reduce food access barriers. She also coordinates grassroots advocacy activities on key legislative issues and trains and mobilizes their community food advocates. She's a graduate of George Warren Brown's School at Washington University in St. Louis and has an MSW from there. We also have from Legal Services of Eastern Missouri, a staff attorney in the Public Benefits Program, Elizabeth Larsen. We're glad to have Elizabeth with us. She graduated from St. Louis University School of Law with a certificate in health law in May 2016. You probably know Sydney Watson, I would guess. So yeah, all right. Sydney is a wonderful ally of our work at Empower Missouri and has given us a lot of great briefing papers over the years. She's licensed to practice law in Missouri since September of 2016, and she began working at Legal Services as their program director of the Connecting Kids to Coverage grant program, and has helped create Legal Services Youth and Family Advocacy program as its staff attorney before moving into her current role as a staff attorney in the Public Benefits Program. So we're really grateful to have both Elizabeth and Sarah with us today. We are going to start with Sarah looking at school issues and children's issues, and then we're going to zoom out just a little bit to the SNAP program that serves also adults and some of the newly unemployed. And then I will talk about what we think is going to happen next with federal legislators and what we need you to do on a criminal justice issue, on nutrition issues, and on housing issues at this time, so that we all stay marching along together, which is how we have effectiveness as advocates, is to coordinate our actions together. So let's start from hearing from Sarah. Sarah, thank you for being with us today. I'm going to mute my line, and if all of you would mute your lines, that would give us a better sound quality. You mute yourself by using the mute button in the lower left-hand side of your screen, or the little box that says mute and unmute up in the top square where your picture is. Or if you're on the phone and not using the online version, you use *6 to mute and unmute your line. And we'll appreciate you doing that. Thanks so much. Take it away, Sarah.
Great. Hi, everyone. So thanks for joining this afternoon. As JMO said, I am Sarah Ritter. I'm the manager of public policy with Operation Food Search. Operation Food Search is a hunger relief organization focused on addressing childhood hunger and family food insecurity in Missouri. I am going to go over some of the changes that we've seen with the child nutrition programs due to coronavirus. I want to let you know about some of the resources that are available to connect families with food during this time. And I will also briefly go over a new food assistance program that we hope to see launched in Missouri soon. So for those on Zoom, I have a presentation going. For everybody who's on the phone, I'll kind of try to describe what's happening on the presentation, but I'll be able to give this to JMO and Empower Missouri to upload onto their website afterwards if that is of interest. First, we'll have to figure out how to move it. There we go. So for child meals, as I'm sure a lot of you are on this call are aware, many children in Missouri get access to healthy meals through school. In fact, over 450,000 students in our state qualify for free or reduced price school meals. And we also know that low-income students get around 47% of their daily nutritional intake from those breakfasts and lunches at school. So what happens when our schools are closed like they are now? Luckily, we have had many school districts and community organizations step up to the plate to serve meals. There are 2 federal programs that allow schools and organizations to serve free, healthy meals to kids ages 18 and younger. So these programs are the Summer Seamless Option and the Summer Food Service Program. Both of these are federal programs that are administered through our state departments. So these are programs that existed before the pandemic. They typically operate during the summer months when school isn't in session, but since schools closed early this year, it was approved to begin the programs early. There have been some changes to the way that the program operates during COVID-19, so I did want to briefly go over some of those changes, specifically the changes that affect how families are able to access the meals. So the first is that typically these meals are served, typically meals through these programs are served in a group setting. It's called a congregate feeding rule, which is a terrible name, but that's what it's called. So this means that the children have to eat meals on site. However, this rule has been waived during the pandemic to support social distancing practices. So you'll notice that a lot of the sites are going to a grab and go style meal or something where families can drive through almost and kind of grab the meal so that we can minimize the amount of in-person contact that there is between school administrators or those who are administering the meals and the families. Another one of the changes that we're seeing is that sites can now provide multiple days worth of meals at one time. So families don't have to be coming out every single day to receive the meals. Some sites are even doing up to a week's worth of meals at one time. And another change that we are also seeing that I want to note is that parents are allowed to pick up on behalf of their children if that child is sick. That's not usually true for these programs, but during the pandemic, especially as all these people are getting sick, we know that kids can get sick too. So if your child is sick at home, they do not want you to have to bring your kid out just to potentially, expose other people to the virus or get your child even more sick. So that is an option now for parents during the pandemic. However, I do want to note that it's really important that most likely sites are implementing this in different ways. So I would always encourage folks to call the site before going, especially if it's your first time going to a new site, in case something about that has changed or there's any other information that you need to know about. And I thought, just for a moment, while we're on this topic of child meals when school is closed, I wanted to mention that schools close every year during summer meals. So some schools do, during the summer months, sorry. Some schools do have summer school. Those kids are still provided with summer school. They're still provided with meals when summer school is in session. But when we look at a map of summer meal locations, there are fewer locations in July than there were in June, and even fewer in August than there were in July. On average, only 1 in 10 kids in Missouri has access to summer meals. So this issue of where and how do kids receive meals outside of the school months is something that the kids in our state are confronted with every summer. So I just think that that's something that is important to note. But let's take a second. Let's talk about where you can find child meal locations closest to you. So I have two resources that I would like to share with you. The first is a statewide resource put together by the Department of Health and Senior Services. So for those on the phone, this resource can be found on DHSS's website. And again, I would say the URL out loud, but it's really long, so it's not particularly helpful. So you may have to go and look up the presentation afterwards. For those who can see, there's a map that pops up when you go to this URL. I want to point out this tab at the bottom that says find a food site near me. You're going to want to click on that, and that's where you can type in your address, and it'll pop up with the locations that are closest to you. You'll be able to see the site name, the site address, contact information, and when they are serving meals. The second resource that I'm going to share with you is one that Operation Food Search put together for the St. Louis metro region, in case we have any folks on the call that are in that area. If you go to our URL, which is meals.operationfoodsearch.org, you can see our meal map. You'll be able to type in your zip code in the area that I've highlighted that says your location. And again, it will pop up with all of the sites where children ages 18 and under can receive a free healthy meal in the St. Louis region. It also says site name, site address, the time of service, and then contact information so that you can call in case this is the first time that you're going to go to that site. So aside from child meals, there's another program that supports nutrition for children and families, and that is the Special Nutrition Program for Women, Infants, and Children, otherwise known as WIC. So WIC is an important program that provides food, nutrition education, breastfeeding support, access to health care for low-income pregnant women, new moms, babies, and children, ages 0 through 5. That's why the name, Women, Infants, and Children. This benefit is provided to families primarily through vouchers. The state is in the process of beginning EWIC, but it hasn't been rolled out statewide. So for the most part, most families are still receiving a paper voucher that you take to the store and redeem for food. So there are a couple important changes to the WIC program that I wanted to highlight. These changes help families access the benefit safely during COVID-19. So the first of which is that many of our local WIC clinics are now offering services by phone, drive up, mail, or even online during the COVID-19 pandemic. The way that WIC works in this state is that it is mostly administered by our local agencies, and they have quite a bit of authority. So I would encourage you to contact your local WIC office to find out how they're operating right now, as it may be different from another WIC office. And I'll talk in a second about how you find out where your local WIC office is and how you find that phone number. So the second change is that WIC is now allowing their certain substitutions for WIC approved foods that are out of stock at the grocery store. So you may have heard about WIC product shortages, and this is meant to help address that issue. So for WIC families, if typical products are not in stock at the store, WIC families now have more options for peanut butter, eggs, milk, bread, and baby food. So that's not very specific, but I'll tell you where you can find some more information about WIC. Like I said, WIC is administered through the Department of Health and Senior Services. So they have a really helpful Q&A on their website at health.mo.gov. And then you'll be able to find a link for those on the phone. You'll be able to find a link at the bottom of that page that says Women, Infants, and Children, and it'll take you to this page. There are a couple of things, like specifically helpful links on this website that I wanted to point out. The first is that there is a WIC clinics and retailers map. So if you click on that link, it will take you to a map where all the WIC clinics, as well as the grocery stores that accept WIC in Missouri, are located. So for families looking to apply for WIC for the first time, you will do so through your local WIC clinic. So I would encourage you to go and use this map. to find that WIC clinic that's closest to you, because that you'll need to call them to ask how to apply. The second link that I'd like to point out are these food guides that DHSS has provided to help WIC families navigate the new food substitutions that are available if your store is out of WIC approved food. So these are incredibly helpful, and I really encourage families to take a look, especially if they've been having a tough time finding WIC approved foods at the grocery store. All right, so the last child nutrition resource that I'm going to cover is called P-EBT. You may have heard about this new benefit called Pandemic EBT or P-EBT, but if you're wondering what it is, P-EBT is a temporary food assistance benefit available for households with children who receive free or reduced price meals at school. We at Operation Food Search have been calling P-EBT school meals at home, since that's pretty much exactly what it is. This benefit will be $428 for each child from pre-K to 12th grade to help families to cover some of those food costs for students while they're not in school. So the catch is that P-EBT is not currently available. I know that there has been a lot of talk about this benefit, but our state departments must receive approval from the United States Department of Agriculture before they can begin the program, and we are still currently awaiting approval, as most states are in the United States. They have actually, the USDA has only approved a handful of states to begin implementing this program, so Missouri is in, unfortunately, good company, awaiting their approval. So there are a couple things that I can tell you about the program once it is approved. There's a couple ways that families will be able to access P-EBT that I want everybody to be aware of. So the first is that if your family is currently enrolled in SNAP, then the benefits will be automatically uploaded to your EBT card. You won't have to do anything. The important part is that all of our non-SNAP students, they will need to apply for P-EBT through a special application process. So this information and the application will be distributed to qualifying households through our school districts and other community partners. Once our state agency gets approval from the USDA, I know that the state is just as anxious to receive approval for this program as we are, and I'm sure other families are as well. So they will be getting information out very quickly once that approval does come through. So I encourage everyone who is interested in this program to keep checking the Department of Social Services website for updates. I listed the URL on the presentation, but it is basically, if you just go to mydss.mo.gov, you should be able to find a link at the top that says find COVID-19 information about food stamps, and it has a great Q&A about P-EBT, and they'll be updating information more information once it's available. So finally, there's just a couple more resources that I wanted to share with you all before turning the presentation over to Elizabeth. We at Operation Food Search created a family food finder for the St. Louis region. This is a flyer, and we are in the process of translating it to a statewide family food finder, and that will be available on Monday. So we'll be pushing the new statewide flyer out through our social media channels and on our website. So I wanted to make sure to flag that for you all. Please be sure to check back with us if that's of interest. We have also launched a new campaign, social media campaign through our Twitter account called What You Need to Know Now. We know that there's a ton of information coming in and changing all the time. So we have created some cute, fun infographics that we're sharing on Twitter, and just of little nuggets of information for you to be aware of. So please be sure to follow us on Twitter. Our Twitter handle is @OFSFoodAdvocate. We are also updating our website very frequently with any of the latest information to any of the nutrition programs, as well as some regular program information if you're new to SNAP or WIC, or want some more information about how you may be able to administer child meals yourself. So you can do so on our website, find all that information on our website at operationfoodsearch.org.
And thank you, Sarah. And before we move to Elizabeth, why don't we see if there are any questions for Sarah while it's fresh in your mind? Feel free to either put it in the chat box or to unmute yourself and to verbalize your question.
Hey, Sarah, this is Bill McKelvey. Can you clarify, I thought I heard you say this, your food finder map will be statewide in the near future, is that correct?
Yes. We created it at first because we were asked from some of the local school districts in the St. Louis region how they could help their families, especially as some of the schools have had to cease doing their meal service. But we realize there's a need statewide, so we are soon on Monday or Tuesday, we'll be done with it, and we've kind of transitioned it into being a statewide resource.
Okay, thank you for sharing. And I'll just mention, there is, so CARES on the University of Missouri campus, they do a lot of mapping and resource sharing. They also have a food finder map. And I think it's a little bit different than yours. So theirs operates kind of on this, it's user-generated information. So food pantries, other retail outlets would enter information into their map to populate the map, which is then shared with people. So I can put the link to that in the chat.
That's great, Bill. I was about to ask you to do that. I think that would be very helpful.
Sure. Thank you.
And it's really great to see you on. The folks at the Hunger Atlas were speakers at our conference on nutrition assistance last fall. So always good to see Bill on a call. We have a question for Sarah from Jamie Rodriguez.
On those boundaries, do they have boundaries of the food pantries?
Boundaries of the food pantry? Does your resource have the boundaries of the food pantry?
The statewide resource that we have put together for the food pantries, we're linking people to Feeding America. So if you're in the St. Louis region, you can always look at our Find Food map, but Feeding America has works with food banks across Missouri, and then each food bank has their own food pantries. So it is slightly more difficult to find that information, but yeah, you'll find specific information about pantries through each one of it depends on where you're located. Does that help?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, great. And Jamie's question is, do you know if P-EBT, once approved and implemented, will extend retroactive benefits back to the date of school closure? Also, will it continue through the summer, or will it go through the usual end of the school year?
Wow, great questions, Jamie. I don't want to say that they will be retroactive because I am not sure at this moment, but I don't believe that the original plan for P-EBT was meant for it to be only a benefit when schools were closed unexpectedly. So it was meant to be a benefit for March, April, and May. So I don't believe that it will go past May, but let's hope that it's retroactive. At the moment, I don't know that answer.
We'll try to keep people updated through social media and through our website and other means as well. I'm sure all of our allies. So we'll keep looking in on more about that. Other questions for Sarah? I do see that Representative LaDonna Applebaum has joined our call today. Welcome, Representative Applebaum. We thank you and all Missouri's legislators for all of the work that you're doing right now to try to care for your constituents in a very challenging time. Are there other Missouri legislators that are on who I may not recognize the handle that's connected with your little box or the phone number that's on the dial-in only, folks? Feel free to introduce yourself. All right. Well, glad to have you on, Representative Applebaum. All right, well, we will now hear from Elizabeth Larsen.
I was going to say thanks for mentioning my name, and it's good to hear everyone and get all the good information.
All right, well, great. And now we'll have Elizabeth Larsen from Legal Services of Eastern Missouri. And I'm going to mute myself again, and if others would mute their lines either using the mute button or the *6, that would be very helpful.
Perfect. Hi, everyone. My name, again, is Elizabeth Larsen. I'm staff attorney in the Public Benefits Program at Legal Services of Eastern Missouri. So I'm going to share my screen. I have a PowerPoint as well. So for those who called in, I'm going to make sure to send the PowerPoint so that you all can look at them later if you'd like. Let's see. All right, so today I'm going to discuss the Missouri Food Stamps Program, specifically the new COVID-19 rules and policy changes, as well as a quick discussion of how to apply for food stamps during this current pandemic. So Legal Services of Eastern Missouri provides free civil legal help to low-income individuals in our community. We serve 21 counties along the eastern side of Missouri. Today, I'm only covering Missouri food stamps rules and application process. Each state has its own food stamps application and process, so if you live or are helping someone who lives in a different state, you'll need to look at that state's food stamps application process. So here's what I'll cover during my portion of this webinar. I'll briefly describe the Missouri Food Stamps Program. I'll discuss the new COVID Missouri Food Stamps rules and policy changes. I'll give a brief overview of the online application process with some helpful tips for completing the application, and I'll cover verification and how to send it in during the COVID crisis. So what is the food stamp program in Missouri? Food stamps, or SNAP, as it is sometimes called, is a food assistance program where the government gives money to buy food each month to people and families who meet certain eligibility requirements. These requirements include income and resource limits, and sometimes work and other requirements. The Department of Social Services Family Support Division has a formula it uses to determine how much food stamps each household can get every month. The Family Support Division looks at how many people are in the household, how much money comes into the household every month, and certain expenses such as rent, mortgage, utilities, and sometimes medical bills and childcare expenses. This means the amount one household gets can be really different than another household because every household has different expenses. For people who are approved for food stamps, the money is put onto EBT cards. These cards look like and can be used like debit cards in order to buy food at most grocery stores, convenience stores, and farmers markets. There are usually signs that say EBT accepted here or something like that to show if the place accepts food stamps. So jumping into the changes because of COVID-19, the Family Support Division offices are closed to the public at this time. This means families cannot go into their local office to apply for food stamps or other benefits. Family Support Division staff are still answering questions through their call center and have even added hours to their call centers to try to get more people's questions answered. I went ahead and put the new dates and hours on this slide. I'll discuss how to submit information to the Family Support Division without going into their office a little bit later in my section of the webinar. People who call the call center may run into wait times to talk to somebody, or they could get disconnected altogether before reaching someone to talk to. I would encourage people to keep calling to connect with a staff member to get their questions answered, even though it can be time-consuming and frustrating to do so. So here are some of the new COVID-19 rules with Missouri food stamps. So usually certain people are required to work a minimum number of hours each month to get food stamps. These are called work requirements. Most people think of work requirements in the context of able-bodied adults without dependents, or sometimes called ABODs. Because of COVID-19, these work requirements are temporarily waived for everyone, including ABODs. This means a person's employment status will not affect their ability to get food stamps. Anyone whose application was rejected in the past, or if they lost food stamps in the past because they weren't working or doing enough work training, they should reapply right away. So usually the Family Support Division requires everyone who submits a new food stamps application to do an interview, either in person or on the phone. Because of the COVID-19 crisis, the Family Support Division is temporarily getting rid of this requirement and will process the application without doing the interview. This will actually allow people to get food stamps faster. So we've heard that some people are still getting a letter in the mail telling them that they have to complete a food stamps interview. At this time, they can just disregard this letter. To get food stamps, people often have to give information to the Family Support Division, such as proof of income like pay stubs. Right now, because of COVID-19, the Family Support Division is relaxing its rules if someone applying cannot get access to this information because of the current crisis. The Family Support Division will allow people to self-attest or just say and tell the information as proof. This will allow people to get the food stamps faster. I'll discuss the verification requirements again in more detail in my presentation. So my final point on this slide, normally households receiving food stamps must go through a recertification or a renewal process every 6 months. Participants usually receive paperwork in the mail that must be completed and returned to FSD to verify and update their information in order to continue receiving benefits if they're still eligible. DSS has been granted permission by the USDA to extend certification periods for an additional 6 months for households that were due to complete recertification in March, April, or May. This means any participant that would have had to complete the recertification process during these months will not need to do so until 6 months from the date they would have had to recertify if COVID-19 hadn't happened. So some people are getting more food stamps right now because of COVID-19. This is called pandemic SNAP or P-SNAP, or it's also been called emergency SNAP benefits. Households that do not already get the maximum food stamps allotment per month should have received the maximum amount for March and April if they had active food stamps during those months. The maximum allotment for a household of 1 right now is $194 per month. For a household of 2, it's $355 and so on. I went ahead and put a chart on this slide to show you the current allotments for households up to 5 people, but the allotment continues to grow for each subsequent household size past what I could fit on this slide and on this chart. For the additional emergency food stamps, if a 1-person household, for example, is currently getting $100 in food stamps based on their income and expenses, they should have received an additional $94 on their EBT card for March and April. However, if this person was already receiving $194 per month, they did not get more food stamps on their card because they already have the maximum allotment, so they don't get more money. A few days ago on April 21st, the USDA released guidance allowing states to continue issuing emergency SNAP allotments for additional months. So there are certain requirements the state must meet to receive approval for additional months, but we believe Missouri meets those requirements for May. To our knowledge, DSS is working on submitting the information required to continue issuing the maximum food stamps allotment. We don't know at this time whether Missouri food stamps recipients will receive that maximum allotment for May, but I would say check the MyDSS website for updates on this. So Sarah did a really great job discussing P-EBT, so I'm not going to spend much time on this. As Sarah said, P-EBT is a temporary food stamp benefit that should be available soon for families with children who normally receive free and reduced cost school lunches. These benefits are available to all Missouri families with children who are eligible for free and reduced price lunch in a Missouri school and are currently unable to attend school for 5 consecutive days due to school closure. In this case, school closure due to COVID-19. So again, as Sarah said, this has not been finalized yet, so no one is getting P-EBT. But I would say keep checking the MyDSS website for updates because this should hopefully be coming down soon. So other COVID-19 policy updates, Missouri food stamps have recently been approved to be used for online grocery purchases. This is extremely important for so many families that receive food stamps because, like everyone else, they too are in danger of contracting and or spreading COVID-19 when out in public. Without the ability to shop online and either get delivery or pick up groceries, these households have been required to go physically into the store to get their food. So this ability to buy online will likely be available with chains such as Walmart and Amazon Pantry because these retailers have already have contracts for online EBT purchases in other states. To our knowledge, DSS is currently working on getting this up and running. So again, I would check the mydss.mo.gov website for updates. Economic impact payments or stimulus payments are not going to be considered income for food stamps purposes. So these stimulus payments are also not going to be considered a resource for 12 months after they're received. However, on the 13th month and 14th and so on, any money left from the payment in a bank account or as cash on hand will count towards the household's resource limit for food stamps. However, other payments under the CARES Act are being considered income. And the examples are pandemic unemployment assistance payments, pandemic unemployment compensation, and pandemic emergency unemployment compensation. So these are all types of unearned income that are going to be counted as income for food stamps purposes. So I am not knowledgeable about the differences between these types of unemployment benefits. I only know how they react with food stamps benefits. So to receive food stamps, many students in higher education must participate in work requirements for 20 hours per week. However, the USDA recently issued a mass denial to all states who requested to waive this work requirement for college students despite the current pandemic. That being said, Missouri DSS has been actually granting hardship exemptions to college students who are otherwise eligible for benefits and cannot engage in work due to COVID-19. This means many college students should be getting food stamps despite not being able to work, as long as they meet all the other food stamps requirements. And finally, some states are seeing backlogs in application processing and delays in newly approved applicants receiving their EBT food stamps cards. So we don't in Missouri have any updated information on whether these issues are happening here, but hopefully we'll hear about this soon from DSS. So this brings me to my next point. Applying for food stamps online is the best way to apply right now, especially since all FSD offices are closed and we don't know which offices have drop boxes to drop off a paper application. To complete an online application, the applicant will create an account, go through the application by entering their information and answering questions, and then signing and submitting the application by typing their name. For those who worry about the online application, I went ahead and put the website where you can find the paper application to print and submit. But again, the online application, especially now, is going to be your best bet. I'm not going to go through an in-depth tutorial on the application process during this webinar. If you'd like to see an in-depth review of the application process, go to Legal Services of Eastern Missouri's Facebook page or our YouTube channel to see our video on that subject. That being said, there are a few parts of the process I will mention during this webinar because they can be confusing and are really important to making sure everything on the application is as correct as possible. So some tips for completing the online application. For account registration, passwords can only contain numbers and letters. That was really difficult for some of us when we were trying and practicing setting these up so that we could help clients. We kept getting kickbacks because our passwords were incorrect. So that's something I wanted to make sure to mention. I'd also recommend that the applicant write down all information such as username, password, a secret word that they make you choose, because the applicant will need to remember this information right away in the application process, as well as if they want to sign on again later to review their application or submit verification. There's an expedited food stamp section in the application that has the option to submit the application right then and there, rather than completing the rest of the application. Expedited food stamps can be granted more quickly than regular food stamps for households that meet certain requirements. However, it's best to complete the whole application in order to provide FSD with all the required information that comes up later in the application, especially if the applicant turns out not to qualify for expedited benefits. The criminal history questions in the application should be answered as accurately and honestly as possible. Answering yes to any of the questions does not necessarily mean automatic denial. The applicant should work with FSD to see if they meet an exemption that could make them eligible. The work reduction question is extremely important right now for anyone that's been laid off or has had hours reduced due to COVID-19. The applicant will want to put down information about when their hours were reduced and when their job ended, as well as the reason. Typing because of COVID-19 should suffice. The application is signed electronically and then automatically submitted to FSD right at that time. I would suggest the applicant write down the application number and save or print the application if possible for their records, just in case it's needed. The Family Support Division has 30 days to process non-expedited food stamps applications. This brings me into verification. So as described above, the Family Support Division has relaxed its verification requirements due to COVID-19. However, they were not able to completely waive this requirement, which means applicants still must provide information that is requested of them. Applicants have a few different ways to submit the requested information. Some of these ways are normal means, even when there is not a pandemic, but some are only going to be available while COVID-19 rules are in effect, to our knowledge. So applicants can submit verification documentation like paychecks or a bank account statement on the final page of the online application while applying. They can also sign back onto their account later and click the Review Account History tab and click the option to upload documents. Because of the current COVID crisis, the Family Support Division is allowing applicants to email or fax verification documents in. I included the email address and fax number on this slide. So applicants may be able to bring copies of their documents to the Family Support Division offices. Like I said earlier, the offices are all closed to the public right now, but if the applicant cannot upload the documents or send them through email or fax, some of the offices might have a Dropbox available. I would recommend that they never drop off originals of anything to the Family Support Division if they can help it. So they should just send in or bring in copies. Again, this is the last resort method, I would say, because we do not know what offices have Dropboxes at this time. Finally, applicants have the option of calling the Family Support Division call center at 1-855-373-4636. As I mentioned earlier, because FSD is relaxing its verification requirements, if an applicant can't get this information requested because of COVID-19, they can tell FSD this and ask that they take their attestation or their word about the information. This should suffice. So FSD has added hours to their call center, as I said above. That way they can get people's questions answered faster and for people to attest to their verification information. I want to let you all know that the Public Benefits Program at Legal Services can help people who live in our service area with this process. If you know someone whose application has been rejected or delayed, they've been kicked off food stamps, or they've had trouble with the application process in the past, they can reach us by calling 314-534-4200. They can also go to our website, lsem.org, and click on the Get Help Now tab to do an online intake. For those outside of Legal Services service area, you can go to this website, www.lsmo.org, to find the legal aid organization that serves your county. Every county in Missouri is served by a legal aid organization. Finally, I want to thank my team at Legal Services for helping me put this information together. I also want to thank Empower Missouri for inviting me to speak to you all. And finally, thank you all for the work you're doing in the community to help those in need at this time. I think we have a couple minutes for questions, possibly.
Definitely. Thank you, Elizabeth. And are there some questions for Elizabeth? I had one. What are you hearing about call center times? Because they were already running like 45 minutes before the pandemic happened. Are people having to wait like over an hour, or have they put a lot more people on? What do you know about that?
So that's a really good question. As far as I know right now, we do not have updated information. about call center times or anything, but we have been asking the Family Support Division and DSS for this information. Hopefully we'll get, you know, the call center times soon about this, so that people know what's going on and maybe the best times to call or something like that.
Yeah, I've asked as well and not got an answer on that one. They have answered other questions in a fairly timely manner, so I don't know if it's that they don't really want to have to talk about it right now, or if they feel like that's just too much of a distraction with everything else that's going on. I think there is a meeting of the Cover Missouri Medicaid Advisory Group happening in early May, and hopefully we'll get some data then, because they usually give us, you know, graphs of how many calls there've been and what the wait time is and all that kind of thing there.
JMO, this is Jamie Rodriguez. I work with Liz at Legal Services, just jumping in. So we did have a call with Kim Evans, Family Support Division Director, I think last week, and she shared that actually they're handling way, way more calls than normal. I think that the call center numbers are likely to be pretty good. And I think the reason is because food stamp interviews are waived. So those food stamp interviews can take an hour, and they aren't doing any of those anymore. So I think they're handling a lot more calls because those really long calls are no longer needing to happen.
Well, good, and that's what they should do in a time like this. So that's good to hear. Thank you, Jamie. Other questions for Liz? Do you prefer Elizabeth or Liz?
Either one.
Okay,
Either one
all right.
for me.
I like to call people what they prefer to be called. Other questions for Liz? Or did someone think of something they'd like to ask Sarah? Okay, well, why don't I go ahead and present some information, and then if you have a question for any of the three of us, as long as Sarah and Elizabeth are still on, they will chime in, and there may be some others on the call as well that have some information on some of these topics. So we certainly welcome information from anybody. So I have a few slides for you as well to catch you up on some things that are happening at the federal level and at the state level, because our General Assembly is planning to come back into session next week. So here are some slides for you, and we will have these available as part of the recording that will be on our website just a little bit later today, so that folks can go back and view this webinar again if that's helpful, or share it with people that couldn't be on the call today. All right, so this is our number 8 webinar of this legislative session. We present every 2 weeks during legislative session and once a month in most of the other months. If you're not familiar with Empower Missouri, our mission is to work to secure basic human needs and equal justice for every person in our state through coalition building and advocacy. Our vision is a Missouri in which all people have food, shelter, and justice. And we have some foundational values. We believe adequate nutrition, affordable housing, and equal justice are essential for Missouri's success, that all structural oppressions should be recognized, challenged, and dismantled, that evidence-based public policy should be foundational for those who govern, and that the lawmaking process should be truly accessible to all in our state. So that's what we're about. I've just realized that not only should I be introducing you to Empower Missouri, I just welcomed you all earlier, as this of you all know me, and some of you may not. I'm Jeanette Mott Oxford, the Executive Director of Empower Missouri. I'll be changing to a different title of Empower Missouri later in the year as Director of Policy and Organizing. I'm looking forward to that change and to having an interim Executive Director to strengthen our team so that I can put some of my strengths where I'd really like to be putting them just now, and not have to balance so many other things at the same time. This is a sign of how we've been growing, and rather than trying to continue to wear multiple hats, I'm trying to wear only one in the future. We try to empower people through information about what's going on in the Missouri General Assembly and the U.S. Congress in 6 issue areas. That's affordable housing and homelessness, criminal justice, economic justice, health and mental health, human rights, and hunger. Normally these calls during legislative session tell you what's going on with our General Assembly, but because of the need to shelter in place, they have not been meeting since, well, most of the time since they went on legislative break back in mid-March. There was 1 week there where they went down and did some work on the supplemental budget and on a provider tax. That's very important to drawing down federal money, a healthcare provider tax. But then they went on home and sheltered in place. And it has been announced by the highest ranking majority party leaders in the House and the Senate that they do plan to come back on April the 27th. There will only be 3 weeks left in the legislative session, which ends at 6 p.m. on May the 15th. And there will only be 2 weeks left until the constitutionally mandated deadline for passing the fiscal year 2021 state operating budget. That's supposed to be done by May 8th, according to Missouri Constitution. It can be done and has been done in some previous years that the budget isn't done by the constitutionally mandated deadline, and they come back and do a special session to deal with that. An extraordinary session that's called into being by the governor. The governor in such a case would have to say exactly what's going to go on. People can't bring up other topics that aren't in the governor's call to a special session if a special session is needed. So we'll see what happens. There are those that want this session to only focus on the budget. There are others that want to add some other topics. Certainly there are a whole lot of people out there that have paid contract lobbying firms to help them get something passed this year, or maybe even for several years in a row that they worked on, and everybody wants their item to be among the things that get debated. Multiple sources suggest that these items here might be among ones that we see come up in addition to the budget. There are many in the majority party that want to reverse the Clean Missouri redistricting reforms that were in the package of ethical government reforms that passed at the polls in November 2018. Because that was a constitutional amendment, whatever they suggest would have to go onto the ballot for approval. It would have to be approved through the same constitutional amending process instead of the legislature just erasing what they do not like. And so we will see if that happens. We have endorsed keeping the clean amendment as it was. The claim is that somehow we were all bamboozled, that we didn't read it carefully or study it carefully and did not know what we were doing. I knew what I was doing when I voted yes, and I believe that probably you did as well. And so pay very careful attention if they start to debate this issue. And we'll certainly let you know through our Twitter feed and our Facebook page that debate is happening on that topic, so that you can tune in and listen and reach out to your legislator about it. There's been a multi-year campaign to create a prescription drug monitoring program in Missouri. Representative Holly Ritter has long been the sponsor of that. It's passed out of the House, and it looked fairly clear sailing to get it through the Senate this year. It appeared that some type of an agreement had been reached, partly because many counties are already following the St. Louis County model and doing this. And if it's being taken care of that way, why not just have a statewide program? So some think that that's going to happen, but Representative Ritter actually told me by email yesterday that she's not sure that that's going to manage to get through. So I know she would certainly like for it to happen, but it's just too unpredictable right now. So that's on the short list of things that people suggest, as is something called the Wayfair fix. Any of us that buy things online right now, like if you buy a book online, you're supposed to go pay sales tax to the state of Missouri for that. But very few people do that, and it's lots of millions of dollars that we're not collecting in sales taxes. So there's the opportunity to pass something called the Wayfair fix. The way for that was cleared by a Supreme Court decision a while back, a year or two ago, and some think with our state needing money so badly that may pass this year. In the past, there have been legislators who've demanded that if that passes, it go into an income tax reduction. But there are others, I think, at this time that are saying, no, we just need that money for essential programs and services. Let's pass the Wayfair fix. We have 3 campaigns going on right now that all are COVID-19 related. And here they are listed. We're trying to do one in criminal justice, one in nutrition assistance, and one in housing. So the first one on criminal justice. As you may know, our prisons have been quite crowded in Missouri, and places that are crowded, like say nursing homes, are places where if someone gets COVID-19, it can be easily transmitted from person to person or if staff members come in and even if they are asymptomatic, maybe they have the virus and start passing it on before it is noticed that they have a rise in temperature or something that might get them looked at a little bit more closely. So we're very concerned that prison guards are out in the community and then go into the prison where there's a captive audience. And I didn't mean that as a bad pun, but it kind of came out like one, didn't it? There are a few people there in the prison who are pretty up close against each other. Well, not just a few, but tens of thousands of people. It's important that that they be protected. So we are asking Governor Parson and Director Ann Presythe from the Department of Corrections to reduce the prison population to make it easier to practice physical distancing and to clean areas where the prisoners are, because maybe some of those areas could be sealed off if there are fewer people there. And we also want to protect the staff because the staff is interacting with the community. So what happens with prisoners does impact on community health as well. That's one campaign. Secondly, we're advocating with federal legislators for increases and improvements in the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, SNAP. We think there will be another stimulus package. There have been 3 already so far. So some people are saying stimulus 4.0 and talking about the new one. Thirdly, we want people to advocate for additional support for housing access and stability, plus appropriate care for persons who remain homeless. We'd like all homeless to be housed, but some homeless people may refuse housing for various reasons. We want some things to happen to protect them too. So on our first call to action, we're asking Governor Parson and Director Presythe for 3 things: robust testing for COVID-19 among both staff and inmates, followed by appropriate CDC protocols to mitigate risk to others. For example, if a prison guard, a correctional officer, is diagnosed, we know that that is happening in some facilities. I've heard, I think 3 have been diagnosed at Southeast Correctional Center. They are then told to go home and stay in quarantine for 14 days. And everybody that worked closely with them is asked to go into quarantine as well. So if prisoners also associated closely with those guards, they should go into quarantine, of course, to see if they develop COVID-19 or not. And if they are ill, we want them to be taken to appropriate medical help. Prisons certainly aren't set up to have things like ventilators that may be needed. So given how serious this becomes for some people, we want to make sure that they are in a medical setting where they can get the help that they need. So that's the first item. Secondly, we believe, whether there's COVID-19 or not, that Missouri ought to have a program for elder parole. People over 50 seldom reoffend. We're spending a lot of money on corrections and on health care for older prisoners that we shouldn't have to spend out of our state money because older prisoners are, in general, a low risk to return to the community. So prisoners over 60 and those immune compromised, we think, should be evaluated for whether they should qualify for compassionate release into the community. And then thirdly, there were a lot of people that are, already scheduled to be released sometime this year. We think that many of them should be released now and that they could safely shelter in place in house arrest instead of remaining in the prisons. So those are our 3 requests. And here are ways that you can communicate those. You can call Governor Parson's office at 573-751-3222. You can go to his website, which is governor.mo.gov. And then there's a tab there called Contact Us. And if you pick that, it will let you type into an email form to send an email, or it gives you a mailing address for a regular letter. This will be on a later slide as well, P.O. Box 720 at Jefferson City, 65102. And you can use that to write the governor. You can go to our website, and under the News and Updates tab, you get to a template that lets you fill in, well, it's already got a message there, but we want you to edit it into your own words to make it more effective. Change both the subject line and then the other words to sound like it came out of your mouth, and send that off, and that goes to Governor Parson. If you want to know more on that topic, Cheryl Adelstein from the Jewish Community Relations Council of St. Louis interviewed me this week, and that's on their Facebook page for you to watch, to dig a little deeper into that issue. And then she also has the address for Director Precythe on her slides, or you can find that at doc.mo.gov. So Department of Corrections, doc.mo for Missouri.gov for government. And click on the director button at that website, and you'll find how to write her. On our second call to action, having to do with nutrition, we want to invest more in the SNAP program. The three things that we're asking for there are to boost SNAP benefits by an additional 15%. Yesterday, we participated in a Twitter storm with national allies on food security. And one of the things that we told folks is that the average benefit in Missouri in December of 2019 was $1.31 per person per meal. But the USDA computes these food plans. And for a family of 4, if you use the moderate food plan instead of the thrifty food plan, which is a food plan that's more accurate around what it costs to eat in a nutritious fashion, that would cost closer, well, up to $2.88 per person per meal. So the SNAP benefits really have only been providing about half the cost of a nutritious meal. And that's wonderful that you get that kind of help. The S does stand for supplemental. It's not meant to buy all of your food. It's a supplemental food program. But the reality is a lot of people don't have it in their budget to spend any money on food, because way too much of their money is already going for things like rent and utilities and school clothing and transportation money and healthcare costs. So a lot of people don't have adequate money for food. And we think that in a time like this, raising SNAP benefits by 15% is a really good investment, partly because there have been studies done by ERS at the USDA, at the U.S. Department of Agriculture. There's a bureau there that does a lot of analysis and research, and they say that we get as much as $1.80 in economic impact to benefit our local economies for each dollar that's spent on SNAP. If you don't understand how that happens, well, how that happens is if a grocery store receives SNAP benefits, those SNAP benefits wind up going into the salaries of the clerks and the people that stock the shelves, and the people that it winds up going into the salaries of people that drive the food to the store. It goes into places that the grocery clerks go to pay for their rent or their utilities, or to buy school supplies for their kids, whatever that they spend money on. That money just ripples out. It gets respent. So we get $1.80 in economic benefit for each dollar that we put into the SNAP program. So it's a great place to invest some more money now. Secondly, we want the minimum SNAP benefit to go from $16 a month up to $30 a month. There are folks whose incomes, especially like seniors that have Social Security benefits, their incomes are not always what they really need to live, but the income guidelines are so stringent already to get into the SNAP program that a lot of people just may not apply because they're like, this is way too much trouble to get $16 a month. Well, if it was $30 a month, that would help people take the initiative to go ahead and apply and see if they could get the $30. And maybe they'd get more than $30. Maybe the last time they tried, they could only get $16. And maybe some things have changed at their house and they could actually get $50 now or $100 because they haven't managed to think about what all's changed about how things are set up in their budget than the last time that they applied. So we want to encourage people to apply, and we want those that are at the upper incomes of the income guidelines and resource guidelines to get at least $30 a month. And then finally, we want to suspend all administrative rules that would weaken or terminate SNAP benefits until we have a full recovery from the economic downturn. We actually at Empower Missouri would like those harsh rules to end anyway. We fought those all along. We fought them in the 1996 Welfare Reform Law. We fought them in the 2015 Missouri Reform Law, which was called Senate Bill 24. Those rules have cut tens of thousands of people off of programs like TANF, Temporary Assistance for Needy Families, and SNAP in our state. And they have not helped us have better outcomes. Because people don't have enough income and enough food, there are lots of consequences. There's toxic stress to children affecting their brain development. There's exacerbation of mental health conditions and of the tendency to relapse when people are in addiction when they are hungry. There are no positive impacts of hunger, something that my dear friend Colleen Coble from the Missouri Coalition Against Domestic and Sexual Violence said once when we were testifying on Senate Bill 24 a few years ago. There are no, well, actually it wasn't on Senate Bill 24, it was on one of the work documentation bills that was heard in the Senior Committee on Seniors, Families, and Children. And she said, there are no good health impacts. There are no good consequences of hunger. And repeated it 3 times during her testimony. That was her whole testimony. So that's very true. Here's what we want you to do on nutrition assistance. We want you to contact your U.S. representative and senator. You can find out how if you're not quite sure who your U.S. representative is. If you go to the state Senate page at senate.mo.gov and pick the legislator lookup tab, it'll have you put your street address and your zip code in there, and then it'll tell you how to contact all your folks, your U.S. Senators, your U.S. representatives, and also your state officials. And I think it even gives you your local ones as well, like an alderman or whatever. There's how to reach Senator Blunt and Senator Hawley. They have contact pages on their websites. The one for Senator Blunt also lists some phone numbers for local offices. The Hawley website does not do that. If you like to do the Twitter thing, there are the Twitter handles, and those are listed in the order of the districts. So at Lacey Clay Moe for District 1, at Rep Ann Wagner for District 2, at Rep Blaine Press for District 3, that's Blaine Luchtemeier, for Vicki Hartzler at Rep Hartzler for District 4, at Rep Cleaver for District 5, at Rep Sam Graves for District 6, at US Rep Long for District 7, and at Rep Jason Smith for District 8. And then all of us in Missouri have as our U.S. Senators Roy Blunt, and at Hawley Moe, Josh Hawley. By the way, Senator Hawley has done a couple of things that we really applaud. One was fighting for the lowest income people who didn't file taxes to get the stimulus checks. And recently he suggested that there should be a wages program where people get 80% of their wages during the pandemic in order to keep people from being economically challenged. And both of those are really good ideas that we applaud him for offering and taking a stand on. When you tweet on nutrition assistance, we hope that you will use the hashtag SnapMatters. And you can see that there, and you can read all of those. If you go search by SnapMatters, hashtag SnapMatters, you'll find a ton of tweets that went out between 2 and 3 o'clock our time yesterday as we participated in that Twitter storm. And you can magnify the benefit of those by continuing to pass them on. Our third call to action is about investing in housing security. We want to ask our governor, Michael L. Parson, to issue rent and mortgage payment suspension for April and May and include a ban on evictions. There are some local municipalities that have already taken that step. You can call him at 573-751-3222. If you missed getting that address I gave out earlier, it's Office of the Governor at P.O. Box 720, Jefferson City, Missouri 65102. If you wonder about the salutation, it's the Honorable Governor Michael L. Parson in address. If you ever had to introduce him to speak somewhere, you'd say His Excellency. There are all of these protocols, right? So we'll fill you in on those things. You can also use the contact form that we gave you on slide number 7, where you go to his website to write him. The other thing on housing is we want to ask our federal lawmakers, the people we just talked about on slide 9, to include $100 billion to keep every renter with low incomes in the U.S. stably housed for the duration of the pandemic. That's a figure that's been computed by the National Low Income Housing Coalition. And speaking of them, they have a template that you can use there in the middle of the page in order to write your federal legislators, and they have a ton of resources at their website under coronavirus and housing homelessness that will let you know anything that you need to know in order to feel informed enough to send a message to your federal legislators. So we urge you to do that. Right now, if you go to our website and pick news and updates and then go down to where it says call to action needed, you will get a template that lets you write Governor Parson about that criminal justice matter, about the prisoners, the inmates and the guards, and what we want to do to prevent spread of COVID-19 in our prisons. But starting next Monday, we'll switch to a different message that you can use at that very same link, and it will be about nutrition and housing. So right this week, go pick that now and fill it out, and ask your friends to do so as well, to send the governor a message about prisons. And then a week from now, or next Monday, we hope that you'll switch over and do it again. That time you'll be writing to Senator Blunt, Senator Hawley, and your U.S. representative about nutrition and housing. Did you read those? Those went by real fast, didn't they? Let's back up. We want you to make sure to notice all the things that are coming up on our website. You can join our Affordable Housing and Homelessness Coalition. You can join us for our next Empowering You webinar on May the 7th at 1 p.m. when the topic will be the Missouri budget, what's happened with the legislators going back on the budget, unless something, we don't know for sure. If there's an uptick in the number of people diagnosed this week, they may decide not to go back in person next week. But right now they plan to go back on April 27th. Whatever's happened with the budget, we'll have an update on that on May the 7th. And we'll also let you know what's happened with the federal coronavirus relief legislation. That's our plan for May the 7th. You can also tune in. Let's go kind of in the order of these things as they're happening. Tomorrow is our Smart Sentencing Coalition call at 11 o'clock. You can find that under the events tab on our website at www.empowermissouri.org. Pick events, and you can find a whole string of things there that you can do. On May the 1st, our Kansas City advocates are having a forum on inequitable healthcare access, how it was before the pandemic and how it is now. You can watch that wherever you are in the state. We had been having forums for the Kansas City folks on the first Friday of the month, and for the St. Louis folks on the third Friday of the month. And now, while we're having to do things through virtual meetings, we've just opened them up to everybody. So feel free to join the folks in Kansas City at noon on May 1st if you want to talk about healthcare. And then we'll have another Smart Sentencing Coalition call on May the 8th, and we'll have our Affordable Housing Coalition call on Monday, May the 11th. It's the second Monday of the month at 2 p.m. So we invite you to join any of those and to watch for other events that get announced by going to the events tab of our website. And then that's how you find me. I like to be called JMO for short. You can email me at Jeanette@empowermissouri.org or follow us on Facebook or Twitter. Are there any questions for me? Let's see if anything showed up in the chat box. Nope. Does anyone have something they'd like to ask about any of the topics that I talked about, Elizabeth talked about, or Sarah talked about? We were apparently either very educational, or the lure of your online streaming programs has gotten to you and you've left the call. Is there anyone on the call that has an announcement for us or some information that needs to be shared for the good of the group?
Well, Jeanette, I'll just say everything was very informative, so you don't think everybody out here is asleep.
Well, we appreciate it. Thank you. Well, Representative Applebaum, well, I see she just left, but I was just wanting to wish her safety next week. I'm concerned about them going back. I do know how much pressure legislators feel about taking up our state budget, but I just hope that they all follow, very careful precautions. There was a big difference in how the debate looked right before they went on legislative break, and then how it looked when they came back during the officially announced shutdown. People wearing masks, only letting a few people into the chamber at a time, asking a lot of staff to stay out of the building. They've asked lobbyists that go to the Capitol to wear masks. I actually pretty much am planning any advocacy that I do will be by phone and by email. I don't think I have much business going down there and contributing to the danger of it all by going in and out of the building a lot. So let us wish our legislators well and that they make good decisions about whether to go back or not. Are there any final thoughts, or shall we sign off for today? All right, well, thank you for joining us for this edition of the Empowering You webinar. And the next one will be May the 7th, and we hope to see you again then. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter in the meantime, and keep watching our website for updates. We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.